Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. Choo choo. Yeah, we're on lockdown. Doesn't matter. Things are still happening. Things are still going forward. The news is still newsworthy, and what's relevant is relevant, and what's not relevant is not relevant. Right, Stacy?
Well, you know what? In my headlines, I'm going to compare these stories to the Chinese finger trap. Now, I used to love that toy as a game, and it worked on me every single time. The simple puzzle trapped me in its fingers. Remember, for those who don't know, it's kind of shaped like this and is made with bamboo strips that you put your fingers in the two ends of the hole. And what happens when you do that, Max?
Oh, yeah. You
pull your finger.
You get pull.
And you know what happens is it shrinks in size. The tube shrinks in size. How to get out of it, how to escape it, is you're supposed to relax and put your fingers together and the holes expand. You know,
I could watch this for hours.
We're not a magic show, but what is magic is what the Fed has been doing, what the US government has been doing for the last 20 years. Anytime the debt load gets too big and all the fraud gets too big and the CDO fraud and the dot-com crash, every single time is met with more money printing. But the cycle, the fact that it keeps on crashing and it keeps on, the fraud keeps on building.
Yeah. It's
like they're stuck in this Chinese finger trap. They keep doing the same thing. Them printing is exactly like the little kid pulling their fingers further and further apart.
In other words, they should just, if they find themselves in a hole, stop digging. That's the Western analog to the Chinese finger trap.
Perhaps, but you know what? The thing is, if they just relaxed, if they didn't try to micromanage, if they didn't try to rescue all their banker friends and commit the moral hazard, if they just relaxed and said, you're going to have to fail. That business is going to have to fail. That fraud, you're going to have to go to jail. You know, if they just gave into what is the natural business cycle, and instead of fighting the business cycle sitting there right in the middle of the Chinese finger trap. All they have to do is just relax, let it fall apart, let it collapse, let it go bankrupt.
Right. Well, there's moral relativity and moral hazard associated with what you're saying here in the economy and on Wall Street and the banking industry. They keep moving the goalpost in terms of what constitutes immoral or illegal activity. We've been saying this for a long time now. Every time they commit an illegal act, they simply decide to change the law and say, well, that's no longer illegal. That's how the 2008 crisis was a repeat of the S&L crisis of the 80s under Reagan. And the reason it was allowed to happen is that after the S&L crisis, there was a wholesale architecting of the laws governing the banks to make what was illegal then no longer illegal and to make it legal. And in 2008, what was illegal was legal, and they committed that massive fraud, and there was that global financial crisis. And then after 2008, after Lehman and Bear went bust, they said, you know what, we don't want to leave any of these banking shenanigans behind. We need to change the laws again to make even the few things that were illegal now legal. And now we have 2020, where there's literally nothing in place. There's no laws, or if there are laws, there's no enforcement. And so it's just Chinese finger puzzle really between Satan and Jamie Dimon.
I thought they were the same thing, but that's another story, another episode. We've covered that many times. So on this front, though, you know, the child who you pulled this trick on, they put their fingers at either end and they start to panic. They pull harder and harder and harder. And the same thing, you've seen this over and over with the U.S. Federal Reserve. And remember, it's only been around since 1913, 1914, so it's still a baby compared to, say, the Bank of England, which has been around for hundreds of years. So what you're seeing is, remember, we keep on hearing about this conundrum. They can't figure out why wages aren't rising. They can't figure out why consumers aren't spending. They can't figure out why deflation keeps on happening. They can't figure out why this money printing. The same thing. It's like, I'm pulling so hard, I can't figure out why I can't get my fingers out of here. Well, you know, that constriction that I told you about, the tubes, how they constrict, that's like the money velocity collapsing. That's the same thing. You see that in the trick, the puzzle they're trapped in this ivory tower of the New York Fed and the St. Louis Fed and the Chicago Fed and all these Feds. They're all stuck in this mind trap of this finger trap of mind.
It's true that they keep doing the same thing over and over. It's cognitive dissonance, isn't it? They don't understand that by doing the same mistakes over and over again, they're going to end up with the worst and worst outcome. Because at the same time, they write eloquent op-ed pieces for the Wall Street Journal that explain the eloquence and the sophistication and the erudition of these policies from Larry Summers and others, how genius they are from the bowels of the Harvard think tanks, and why this is, of course, the right thing to do, even though the results, the actual proof of what they're doing is catastrophic.
For the adults in the room like us, Keiser Report audience, Keiser Report presenters, we're watching the little child. Amusingly, we're like laughing. But after 20 years, it's like Chinese water torture. You're starting to like, okay, this is just torture. This is like, let's help this child out. Let's talk to them about Bitcoin, a neutral unit of account, gold. Like, there's an obvious answer out of your solution. The relaxation is let the business cycle rule, let a neutral currency, a unit of account that can't be manipulated, rule. Like, let that happen.
Right. When does Chinese water torture become waterboarding? Right. So 20 years ago, the drip, drip, drip of money supply increase was unnoticed. But now with these quantitative easing programs, it's more like waterboarding. So the consumer is held down on their back and they have a rag on their face. And Larry Summers and Jay Powell and Jamie Dimon are there pouring buckets of water in their face and simulating the act of choking to death and saying, this is going to continue until the deflation stops. And then until the actual person on the water boarding table dies, and then they'll blame them.
And now let's look at the whole economy here. That is, the global economy is almost entirely shut down. And why? Is because the United States is the #1 economy in the world, and we're the world's consumer. So Japan and South Korea and Singapore know how to manage the pandemic, and they can remain open and they could provide us with goods and services. However, we're too stupid, right? We're stuck in this finger puzzle. We can't figure our way out. To most people in the world, to all these people in Asia who know how to wear a mask, we seem pretty ridiculously stupid, right? Like, dudes, just put on a mask.
Well, nature zigs and nature zags. And when it zigs, you better zig. And when it zags, you better zag. So when the coronavirus hit and nature zigged, Asia, principally China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, they zigged. But America and the United Kingdom zagged. And the result is one was prepared and is going to survive better, and the others are not so good.
Well, let's look at two headlines about what United Kingdom and the United States did versus what Asia did. When we went into lockdown, Max and I, about 75, 80 days ago, we thought it would be just like Asia, that it would only work for, last for 3 or 4 weeks because everybody would be not stupid. They wouldn't be sitting there 2 months later stuck in the finger trap. Like, we're still stuck in the finger trap. So there was one story out of New York, and even though Andrew Cuomo now is considered a great hero, and just because he does a good press conference, like, what did they do? New York sent recovering coronavirus patients to nursing homes. Okay, nursing homes in America where the elderly are put, they live. And we sent recovering patients there, but a lot of them weren't recovering. They were still infected and thus spread to the most vulnerable population.
Everybody laughed at Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer that night when Santa couldn't see. And he called on Rudolph to help him guide his sleigh. And then all the reindeers loved him and called him a hero. And the point of my little story is that those countries that were once considered maybe too authoritarian or autocratic now are looking like, well, we know how to handle a coronavirus. And those that had kind of like an election system that produced the stupidest among us, maybe not so smart.
Okay, look at Japan. Japan has about 2% of the cases that the United States does. They didn't have a lockdown. They don't do tracing. It's because the people themselves are not stuck in a finger puzzle trap. They're not trying to pull their finger.
They're humble people. That's why they're humble enough to realize they have to act. New Zealand, very humble. Brilliant leadership. America, boneheaded, egocentric, macho, knucklehead. There's like, duh.
The rest of the world knew, and you could see it with China, Wuhan first. They had the virus first, and what did they do? They separated the ill those with the coronavirus into their own separate units. They built those tents. Remember, they built those hospitals, those field hospitals, and they put all the sick there. So why? So they don't spread it to everybody else. So that was quite obvious. Here, when I saw that tweet about New York sending the coronavirus patients to the old folks' homes, well, we also sent our jobs to China and now pretend as if we expected a different outcome. The same thing, the same sort of Chinese finger trap where, like, it was obvious, right? As soon as you export all your production, all your innovation to China, that you would end up in a situation like this where we don't have masks, partly because maybe we're too stupid to, but also we don't even have them. So it's not, because it's not an option for us, because we don't make masks here, we have to come up with a stupid reason why we're not wearing masks. It's not because, you know, because we don't want to admit that we're so stupid that we can't make our own masks.
Well, look, since the end of World War II, the United States has been the unbelievable winner at the global geographic macroeconomic gambling casino.
Sure.
With the world reserve currency and really smart and intelligent financial engineers and, you know, software engineers. But that luck has run out. That's my thought, is that this pandemic has exposed incredible vulnerabilities in the United States and the United Kingdom. And that's going to be painful. It's going to be a very painful next 10 to 15 years.
You know, you just have to relax, stop trying to print more, stop trying to bail out bad behavior, stop trying to prevent the business cycle from happening, and maybe our problems will escape and we'll have a flourishing economy again.
Yeah, all this finger pointing, it reminds me of Winky Dink. You know, back in the 60s, Winky Dink and you, Winky Dink, and me always have a lot of fun together. Quick, draw a boat for Winky Dink. So you, yeah, anyone remember that? I'm a boomer. Okay, boomer. Got to take a break. And when we come back, much more coming your way. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to Preston Pysh. He is over there at TheInvestorsPodcast.com. I follow him on Twitter. He's always got lots of insightful things to say. Great to have you on, Preston.
Max, I'm thrilled to be here, man. Stacy, thrilled to be here.
So you are the founder of Buffett's Books, where the slogan is how to invest like Warren Buffett. So Buffett's been in the news lately, so I wanted to pick your brain on this. In the first quarter, Buffett lost $50 billion at his annual meeting. He seemed to blame the Fed. So your thoughts on these losses, his concerns about money printing, why he hates Bitcoin. But let's talk about this. So Warren Buffett is in an interesting spot in his career. He did something people were not expecting. He dumped a huge position in the airline stocks. People were expecting him to be more predatory and look for bargains, et cetera. You seem to be a scholar of Buffett to some degree. Can you give us an idea of where he is and what's going on there?
The big thing that's happening, particularly with the airlines, is this COVID's going to change habits. Just going to change the behavior and the way that people think about travel. I could only imagine the income statements across the whole U.S. as everyone found out that they didn't have to go travel as much as they used to, and that was a major expense on their income statement. So I would expect that that's how he's looking at it. I know that's how I'm looking at airline stocks, is that whatever free cash flow those were kicking off before, I think it's going to be drastically different moving forward. And let's face the facts, he didn't have big gains on any of those picks that he had. So there was no tax capital gains friction there. So I think he was just looking to offload it.
It's interesting for those who have been observing Buffett for decades. I'm in that camp. I've been following him since I was a stockbroker starting in the early 1980s. So it is interesting. He's got this huge cash position, 138 billion or so. And he did buy into airline stocks as early as February, millions of shares, and then dumped them a few weeks later. And he was in airlines in 1989, US Air. He lost some money on that. He dumped out of that. And he vowed never, ever to buy airlines ever again. And he made a few jokes about it. And then he got caught up in the airlines again. And as far as Buffett goes, is his style of investing, is it still, the go-to style to invest? Or is it a bit dated at this point and we're kind of entering a different era with different skill set?
I think that you're bringing up a really important point, because in this we debase fiat at unprecedented levels type world that we're in, you see a lot of value investors really kind of struggling with the approach. And so, and where I think it's really representing itself is in Buffett's portfolio in particular, because all the stuff that he's been acquiring in the last decade, 2 decades, have been very capital intensive businesses. So like the railroad thing, I mean, my God, the tangible assets on these balance sheets are massive. And so when you're going through this situation where currency is being debased, and if you're using that currency as your unit numeraire in order to do economic calculation, all of a sudden you start seeing that the way and the style of investing is struggling relative to other businesses that are first to receive that cash. It's being employed straight back into businesses that are achieving these digital network effects and that have a substantial amount of intangible assets on their balance sheets relative to the things that he's investing in. So yeah, I think you are seeing some of that play out. Now, that doesn't mean that in the future, if we transition into a currency that is actually stable and isn't being debased at unprecedented levels, maybe that style of investing might come back and be a really beneficial way to see the world. But right now, and what we've seen in the past decade, it has not been that case at all.
So on Buffett, not to focus on the man, but on his style of investing, I think we get into some bigger points here. To your point, he is in capital intensive industries, whether it's railway, airlines, mining, that might not be the place to be as we head into a world of social networking and the cloud and things that are intangible. And he's got 138 billion or so on the balance sheet, and he hates gold and he hates Bitcoin. And we might be entering a period of negative interest rates, where suddenly that cash is a liability, and he's boxed himself out of even buying gold because he's been his orthodoxy has been anti-gold for so long, and he hates Bitcoin. Has he painted himself into a corner, do you think?
Yeah, I think he has. I think when you say something to yourself enough times, it starts to become very true to you, even on a subconscious level. And I think that when you look back at how he has said so many times, I mean, people have read the article that he wrote about if you took all the gold in the world and you could put it in on the infield of a baseball, it still wouldn't do anything. And he gets into this cash flow analysis of how he looks at gold and subsequently Bitcoin. And so I think that has set him up to a position where he's going to have to go back on what he has said for all these years in order to navigate what, in my opinion, and I know what your opinion is, kind of in the coming 2 years, is how I expect the timeline to kind of play out the next 2 to 3 years. He's going to really have to go back on a lot of things that he has been saying in order to navigate those and still outperform the market. Now, when I think the part that a lot of Bitcoiners might be, maybe underestimating is, once, let's say that the way that you and I both see this is going to go, Max, which is that Bitcoin's going to step in. It's going to be the new unit numeraire for all economic calculation. As soon as you get a large business, so let's just take Amazon, for example. Let's say Amazon started just doing immediate clearance for all their sales straight into Bitcoin. And now you're looking at, because if we took the 10Ks for Amazon for the last 10 years, and we go back and we denominate those in Bitcoin, the top line revenue, just as an example, and you look at what the top line revenue for Amazon looks like over the last 10 years, if it's denominated in Bitcoin, it's going down. The revenue is going down. So if these businesses start dealing in Bitcoin moving forward, all of a sudden now the revenue is going to start looking like it's going up. Their free cash flows are going to be in a positive trend. Now you can start doing discount cash flows on what that looks like. And all of a sudden you might actually have an equity that's outperforming Bitcoin because they're actually selling it and increasing their amount of free cash flow on their books. So I think that's the thing that a lot of people aren't thinking, because that's probably 2 to 3 steps from where we're at right now. But when that happens, equities to me are going to look a whole lot more exciting than definitely than they are today.
Right. So to your point, theoretically, hypothetically, a big retailer or an airline by simply changing their unit of account from dollars to Bitcoin, suddenly their revenues are looking great, right? Just with that simple stroke of a pen, suddenly they don't look as bad as they were doing. And in markets, so much is driven by cosmetics, right? So much is driven by perception and momentum. And a simple change like that would completely change the perception and could change the way people are investing in the stroke of a pen. I think it's a genius idea you've come up with there. And but just to finish up on Buffett for a second, in the comments he made during his annual meeting about his dumping of airline stocks, et cetera, he seemed to suggest that part of the problem he was having is that when he went to buy stocks, when he was getting phone calls from folks and about to pull the trigger, he was outbid by the central bank. The central bank has become such a huge stock buyer these days. They're outbidding Warren Buffett and buying these stocks. And I think that's got to be a problem in their long run because their balance sheet now is as encumbered and as fragile as anything in the economy, which of course is a huge problem. Now, another investing legend, Paul Tudor Jones, also came out slamming the Fed monetary printing policy. Your thoughts on Paul Tudor Jones getting into Bitcoin?
I think it's massive. I think that, he's such a huge name in the space. And I think you have so many Wall Streeters that have just written it off as this super volatile thing that goes up sometimes because all these crazy people are involved in it. Then it goes down and they haven't done the hard work to try to actually understand how the protocol executes fiat currency. And so now that you have a guy who has a massive net worth, has probably one of the best reputations in all of Wall Street, stepping into this and stepping into it, and I would tell you an aggressive way at 2% of his holdings, I think you got the people who are much quicker to do the critical thinking are saying, hey, I need to take a closer look at this because there's obviously something here if this guy's getting involved. So I think this is bigger news than people realize.
Right, absolutely, and I would agree with you on that. Now, of course, he also owns gold, but he says that Bitcoin is the fastest horse in the race. I take that to mean that for every dollar in gold appreciation, you're going to get $30 to $35 upside in Bitcoin just to get the gold and Bitcoin parity trade established at around $8 or $9 trillion in market capitalization. But this, of course, has reignited or ignited the gold versus Bitcoin debate. Aside from Peter Schiff being wrong every year for 9 straight years, what can you add to this debate, if anything?
I think a lot of gold bugs out there are not going to like me and they're not going to like my response. But the way I see this is you have something, and this is all going to come down to speed of transaction. So anybody who reads history and sees, 1920s Germany, it would by the time you take your money down to the store to buy something, the price had doubled or tripled or whatever. People are not accustomed to that type of scenario playing out because they've never seen it in their entire lives. But for people that have read history and they look at that scenario playing out, you then realize that what we're about to go through all comes down to the speed at which you can transact. So if you've got money and you're trying to send it over to a Bitcoin exchange and it takes 2 days to close out the sell order you had for equity XYZ, and then you got to wait for another, and if you do a wire, it might get there by the end of the day. Those 3 or 4 days in order to just get money onto a Bitcoin exchange is going to literally feel like 4 months. Now, picture yourself owning a bar of gold that you have dug up in your backyard and securing it, finding a buyer, somehow securely sending it to that buyer, right? And in order to conduct the transaction. Meanwhile, the fastest horse, which is literally transacting near immediate transaction clearance of payments on the blockchain, is pumping out 1,000% return measured in the last year. Because I kind of suspect that's what going into 2021 and through 2021 is going to look like as far as percentages, right? So you're going to be sitting there watching that. And if you're trying to sell that gold in order to put a little bit on the Bitcoin train, it's going to literally feel like a decade went by while you're trying to get clearance of payment on it. So I think that this is going to be where I think that this concern and this risk is going to hit its apex is probably around Christmas timeframe of this year when Bitcoin's up there trying to go beyond its previous all-time high of 20,000. I think that that's kind of the moment where people who are holding physical gold are going to literally soil themselves because they're going to realize that they're in a very bad position relative to the buying power that they could have over in Bitcoin.
Right. So the fiat money is being debased. The gold is just too clumsy and hard to move around, takes days. That leaves really only Bitcoin in this environment where speed counts. Anyway, thanks so much for being on Keiser Report, Preston Pysh.
Max, such a pleasure. Stacy, thank you so much. I love you guys.
Well, on that note, we got to say goodbye. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. If you want to catch us on Twitter, it's Keiser Report every Sunday at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on the Keiser Report Twitter Periscope handle. Watch us live for 45 minutes. I bake cakes. Stacy does various exotic dancing. It's the greatest thing on Twitter. Until next time, bye, y'all.